to go.
Are those sweatpants? It's like the Costanza version of the suit. What's up, Nick?
Look like
I got to say, I've never liked him more. That's a great look.
Oh!
Now, it's unfortunate he blew the game with all those turnovers at the end, but that's a great look.
We'll get to it. Boy, if only you had an MVP vote, Nick. Maybe you'd be able to vote that look into an actual MVP vote. All right, here we go.
MVD,
Big
most
story last
valuable
night.
dresser.
Nets, there you go. Nets in Philadelphia. The much anticipated return of Ben Simmons didn't play, but he did attend, so baby steps. Showered with booze as expected, and it didn't get any better for Sixers fans after that. Game of the night, and yet somehow James Harden didn't get the memo. Are we still doing memos? Is that like a thing? The Beard finished 3 of 17 from the field, just 11 points in a 129-100 rout. But according to Harden, this might actually have been a positive. Hashtag glass half full. Take a listen.
Oh.
Tonight was good for us, man. We got our ass kicked, and since I've been here, everything has been, sweet and we've been winning games. And so tonight was good for us, and we get an opportunity to come down to reality, watch film and just continue to get better and making sure we get the right strides.
The spin master of spin masters, James Harden. Hey, Broussard, was this just a blip for Harden, or is this a larger concern? Big game.
Jenna, this is a larger concern. Absolutely, positively a larger concern. And I'm sorry, I don't want to hear that quote from James Harden. If he had never done this before, if he had done it only a few times, a couple times, maybe, but this is a pattern. And this, guys, is why I came on this show right after the trade was made and said Philadelphia will not win a championship with James Harden. Because I questioned how he's going to respond when adversity hits, when times get tough. And that could be big games, playoff games, elimination games. There you see 1-7 in his last 8 elimination games. We've seen 2 for 11 shooting. We've seen 12 turnover games. It's just ridiculous, some of the struggles Harden's had when times get tough. And also, I was really down on him because when your team goes through some adversity, when things aren't smooth, are you going to show perseverance, fortitude, and leadership, or are you going to quit and bail? And we've seen it happen twice with him. I've softened my stance, Nick, you know this, after seeing him play in the first 5 games, because quite honestly, I really like James Harden's game. When he's playing to his potential, I've said he's an all-time great scorer and passer, which is unique.
And playmaker.
But this happened, playmaker. This just happens too often. I'm going to reserve what I do pick Philly to do till we do it officially going into the playoffs. But this is the narrative that will shape the rest of the season for Philadelphia and a large part of James Harden's legacy going forward.
Yeah, it was a playoff atmosphere, and unfortunately, it looked like a playoff game because we've seen this from James before. And this is the tough part of it. This was, in my opinion, Wild's worst-case scenario for Philly. It was that you would be this hyped, this into it. The Nets would show up like it was a playoff game. Joel Embiid, even though he had a tough shooting night, he still found a way to be effective by continuing to get to the foul line. And Harden made 0 2-point baskets. He's 3 for 17. If you remove the Kings game, where we all say he was basically, just trying to play his way out of Brooklyn, this was by game score, according to Basketball Reference, the worst game James Harden has had in at least 4 years. And it's not random. Wow. So that's the concern there. And so, you're 3 for 17. All your baskets are 3-pointers. You go 0 for inside the arc, and you only get to the free throw line twice. And listen, I'm sure he felt like he should have gotten more of the calls, but this is the bugaboo with Harden, Wilds. There are times where the worst version of Harden is a guy who's not necessarily trying to make shots as much as he's trying to get calls. And if he's not getting them, then he's less effective.
Not great.
And so I am very high on Philly. Now, unlike Broussard, I haven't changed. I'm not changing my pick week by week. I'm not. It's the Nets. It's this. It's that.
Lakers.
The Sixers are dead. They're
Lakers.
alive. They might be dead. I'm not doing it. No. I'm talking Eastern Conference. I'm talking Eastern Conference. The West Coast over there. It's a time change. It's confusing. I have been riding with Milwaukee all year. I will continue to do so. However, Philly obviously showed you a few days, in the days leading up to this, how dangerous they could be. And last night they showed you how dangerous they can be to themselves. And so it's a problem. There's no way around it. I really like the people that run the Sixers. I really like Embiid. I once upon a time was probably Harden's biggest supporter in the media. But a game like last night doesn't feel like a fluke. It feels like a trend, and that's the concern.
Right.
All right, so I'm gonna key in on something you just said. You used to really support James Harden. When he was in Houston, you felt like we sort of criticized him too much for the lack of defense. But you've come around and saying like, maybe this guy doesn't have what has been referred to as the clutch gene. Why have you changed so much, Nick, on sort of like abandoning ship on your Harden fandom?
Because the sample size got too large. It was, people used to be like, he didn't show up in the finals against the Heat. It's like, okay, the guy's 21 years old. He's a sixth man. Let's not kill him for that. And then it was, he had the 12 turnover game against the Warriors. It's like, okay, that Rockets team that year was way overmatched. But then there's the game against the Spurs when Kawhi's out, Broussard, that he played so poorly. I, for a long time, said I really thought, and I still kind of do, think that he was concussed. That he got concussed in Game 5 because it was so wild to see how he played in Game 6. But then in 2018, they're up 3-2. Chris Paul goes out. And it's what was he, 6 for 25 from 3 in those two games. And then even in a Game 7 that they won in Houston, the bubble year against OKC, against Chris Paul. In that Game 7, he was brutal. And then the Lakers series in the biggest spots, Games 3. So eventually the sample size is large enough that I say, okay, the critics were right. Now I still think they underplayed how amazing it was when he averaged 36 and 34 in back-to-back years. But we know he can do that. This was a moment. This was the closest to a playoff game you're going to get, Brew. And the fact that it looked like a playoff game in a bad way it's disconcerting to say the least if you're a Sixers fan.
And here's the other thing, Wiles, that's just interesting. That revelation to Nick, the light bulb going off, just happened to correlate exactly when Harden got traded to Brooklyn. So there's that. All right, don't leave that part out. But you are right. The sample size, Nick. You know I'm right. The sample size is huge. You are absolutely right.
Go ahead.
Because I've given him the benefit of the doubt too, time and time again, and I was ready to do it again, but it is hard to. And look, you can have bad games, right? The greatest have had off nights. In big games, even. That's not the issue. The issue is, are you afraid of the moment? The issue is, do you make uncharacteristic mistakes? It's one thing to miss shots. It's another thing to be tentative. It's another thing to not take up the challenge. And we're going to get into the Nets later, but Kyrie Irving